Good morning, welcome to Webhooked on Claris FileMaker. My name is Steve Winter. I'm a former school teacher, a science educator. These days I run a company called Multi-Material Solutions, where I focus primarily on FileMaker web and integration development. That's become an even bigger part of all our lives as the years have gone on. I'm a speaker, a writer, I do quite a lot of open source work. That was me on the beach of West Africa when I cycled from Casablanca to Accra in Ghana. That was a short trip, only 2,500 miles. My longer trip was from Beijing in China to Istanbul, Turkey, which, for those of you that are counting, is just over 9,000 miles. Took a bicycle about. That's my puppy down there in the bottom right-hand corner. Apparently he's sulking because I've gone away and left him for 3 weeks to come to talk to all of you. So this session is about webhooks. I'm going to start off by realizing that I've forgotten to do that. We're going to start off with a bit of an introduction to what webhooks are. And then I've got 5 different demos to do. So we're going to really struggle for time because I wanted to get as much content in as I could. So if I can just ask you to keep those questions in your mind and we'll come back to them at the end or out in the corridor. So webhooks, like APIs, are a way for systems to interact with each other to share information. They're based on the idea of events which occur and they need to be sent from one system to another. So let's take a simple example. Let's say you've just sent out all of your monthly invoices and you want to know when you've been paid. So one way you could do that is you could check with the bank. You could go, hey bank, have I been paid yet? And the bank would say, not yet. Wait a bit. Hey bank, have I been paid yet? Not yet. Wait a bit. Hey bank, have I been paid yet? Yeah, you've been paid $12.57. So that's one way that we could do that. And this is a mechanism that's called polling. It's not terribly efficient because we have to constantly communicate with the bank has to constantly respond. And for us, that's an overhead. If we have one invoice, if we had 100 invoices, it's a significant overhead. If we're the bank that's receiving hundreds of thousands of transactions a day, we don't want everybody asking us every second whether or not they've received any money. And so the resources for that are huge. So there must be a better way that we can do this. And one way that we could do it is we could say, hey bank, tell me when my invoice has been paid. You've been paid $12.57. So I kind of think of this as the don't call us, we'll call you method of integration because it's significantly more resource friendly. I had to make one call ever to say, when I get paid, tell me. And at the point at which the bank receives the payment that's for me, they can tell me right, that it's happened. It becomes even more important if we're using a subscription service. For example, when you register to purchase some form of software license that renews periodically, you might use a payment gateway like Stripe to do that. And a payment gateway like Stripe relies heavily on webhooks because they generate the invoices for you. They charge the customer's card. And every time each of those events occurs, they use that webhook to keep you informed. So a webhook is an HTTP request. It's triggered by an event in a source system and sent to a destination system, often with a payload of data. Webhooks are automated. In other words, they're automatically sent out when the event is fired in the source system. In that example of the bank, the source system would be the bank. The destination system would be us, or for most of us, our FileMaker solution that we need to get that data into. The payload in that example would be something like the invoice number or the bank reference number and the amount that I've been paid when that happened. Now you see here that it says that this is an HTTP request. It's almost always a POST request. Most major vendors who use webhooks will also insist that it's done over HTTPS. So it has to be a secure connection. And I hope that's for pretty obvious reasons, particularly if you're dealing with financial transactions. You need to know that it's going to be secure. I've used receiving a payment in this example, but there are a multitude of other use cases. New orders being placed from your web store into your system, Microsoft tasks being updated in Outlook, someone unsubscribing from your mailing list. The list of reasons and uses for webhooks is almost endless. The way in which you configure a webhook is very specific to the system that is generating those events. This is what it looks like if you want to listen to events with Stripe. You start off by telling them the endpoint URL, that HTTPS endpoint where they can get to you to send you the information. You can give it a description, and then in Stripe, you then go on to say, what events do you want to listen to? Now with Stripe, as you might imagine, there are over 190 different events that you can listen to. And you can choose from 1 to all 190 of them to get the data that happens at the point at which the event occurs. So webhooks are super useful. They're a way that we can get data into our system, and they do provide the backbone of a lot of major systems integrations. And there are thousands of uses for them. So how do we go about getting those webhook calls into our FileMaker solution? In order to receive a webhook, you have to be able to receive an inbound HTTPS request. For that to work, our solution has to be hosted. Now that could mean that you're using FileMaker Cloud. It could mean that you have it on your own on-premise server that's literally on-premise. It could be that you have an on-premise solution in the cloud of your own, or using a hosting provider like FMP Host or one of the other providers. At this point, FileMaker doesn't provide any native mechanism by which we can receive those requests into our solution, even with that solution hosted. Maybe the OData API could be manipulated to work, but the reality is we're going to need some sort of middleware, something that can receive that HTTP request and can then process it into our solution. Now, that middleware is going to be the main part of this session, and that middleware needs some way in which it can communicate with our solution. There are 5 different possibilities for how we could go about getting that and middleware to connect to our solution. There's the FileMaker XML interface. That's been around since that man down the back there qualified, got his FileMaker 9 certification or thereabouts, possibly a little earlier. It's in kind of a state of limbo, the XML interface at present. Nothing's been changed about it in many, many versions. It's not officially deprecated, but it doesn't seem to be getting a lot of love either. The next option would be to use the custom web publishing, or CWP, with PHP. That's built on top of the XML interface. And interestingly, that is officially deprecated by Claris. So that one would not be a good choice for an integration pathway. The next one would be ODB JDBC. We get the FileMaker Data API, and we get the FileMaker OData API. Now, which of those 3 you choose will be very much about the middleware that you end up using to perform that integration. All of these are aspects of FileMaker Server, which is why I said at the outset that our solution must be hosted. Because in order to use any of those techniques or those technologies, it has to be on FileMaker Server. And then you will need an account in your FileMaker solution. And that account will need the extended privilege that's associated with whichever of the technologies you're going to choose. With many of the middleware, they will guide you in the direction of which one to use, and they'll tell you how to go about setting up that account. While we're thinking about accounts and authentication, many webhooks will also provide a mechanism by which they can secure the payload that they're sending to you. Often what they'll do is they'll take the entire payload they're going to send, they'll create a hash of that and send that along with the packet that's coming to you. In that way, you can ensure that that data has come from the place that you think it has, and that it hasn't been tampered with between then and you. So I've mentioned middleware. We're going to look at 5 different middleware options today, and I've got demos for all of them. The first option that we've got is the roll your own. Basically, write your own code that can perform that middleware task for you, that can receive the HTTP request, take the data, and get it into FileMaker. The second option we're going to look at is Node-RED. Node-RED is an automation tool that some of you may be familiar with. We'll take a look at AutoFMS, part of the offering from Proofgeist, that's part of the Automatic suite. We'll have a look at a service called FMAPI, which is custom built to solve this problem for us. And then finally, we're going to look at Claris Connect. So these are 5 different ways that you could go about exposing your system to receive webhooks from elsewhere. Now, I've chosen these 5 because they provide varying degrees of integration support, ease of configuration, and because in some cases like Node-RED or Otto, you might already be using them anyway. If you're already using a service that can fulfill the needs that you have, use that. Don't add new dependencies if you don't need to. It's also worth noting that there are a ton of other ways. As with everything FileMaker, there are 53 ways to solve every problem, and I've just picked 5 of them. Others, you could use if and better forms. You could write a Lambda function and stick that up on AWS. You could use the Monkey Bread plugin, you could use Zapier, you could FMRest, or you could, the list goes on. There are just so many different ways of solving that problem. So what does the middleware have to do for us? It basically has to do 3 things. It has to accept that HTTP request. So it has to be publicly accessible somewhere out there on the internet so that it's possible for the remote system to call that URL, that endpoint, and be received. Having received that, we have to save the payload. Post request is going to come with a chunk of data, and that's going to have all of the information that we're looking for contained within it. So we have to save the payload. Whenever I'm doing any sort of webhook integration, the first thing I do in the solution it's going into is create a table. And I call it webhook request. It has a field called payload. But I want that payload from the request in that field. The next thing that we have to do is we have to be able to process that payload. And that's almost certainly going to involve a script. I'll make a script which will take the payload, parse out the information that we need, and update the records. It will find the invoice number in the payload from Stripe. It will find the right invoice. It will mark it as paid. It will locate the task ID from the call from Microsoft Office, and it will find the task in our tasks table, and it will change the status from backlog to in progress. That script ends up being what you need to do. Several of the middleware options that we look at provide the opportunity to do both of these things at once, to create the record with the payload and then use the UUID of that record to then call the script for us. Sometimes you could just pass the payload directly to the script as a script parameter. But if you're considering a roll your own solution for that, I'd caution you against that. The way in which several of the FileMaker interfaces, like the data API, pass the script parameter is as a URL parameter. If you're giving a big block of JSON, that could exceed the maximum length that the URL can be and ultimately cause you problems down the line. Okay, let's take a look at the different options and the pros and the cons and how we might go about using them. Roll your own code. It's free. Sort of. There are no usage costs if you're rolling your own code. You own the code, It's customizable to your exact requirements. And sometimes that can be a very important aspect of it. You've got no reliance on third parties. You wrote it. It's your data and it's running on your service. And in some situations, that does become a very important aspect of it. I said it was free, but you have to write the code, you have to maintain the code, and you have to host code. So as you can see, not so free. There's a close sibling to roll your own code, and that's to host your own code. Some of the middleware that we're going to look at provide the ability to host their solution on your server. Sometimes that gives you all of the pros with fewer of the cons. But you've still got to host that somehow. Roll your own code. Can be written in any language. Any language at all. You could use Rust, you could use JSON, you could use JavaScript, you could use PHP, you could use Python, you could use whatever you like. If you embark on the roll your own journey, I'd suggest you head towards one of the languages that's often used in the FileMaker community, something like PHP, or JavaScript, Python perhaps, because they come with lots of community resources, lots of support, and with plugins that can help you with that interaction part. But basically, because you're doing that yourself, you can pick whichever of the integration methods you like. You could use ODBC, you could use Data API, you could use XML interface. Given that your FileMaker server is going to need to be somehow accessible as well, you could potentially host that on your own, on the FileMaker server. It's not necessarily recommended, but definitely a possibility. Okay, demo time. Let's get started. I've got several of these to look at. So, this is my story, my scenario that we're going to use the whole way through. We use WooCommerce. WooCommerce is a super popular plugin for WordPress. It's used by many of the shopping carts you end up interacting with online. So let's say that we've got our WordPress, WooCommerce web store, and we use that as our online store. And everything else we do is done in FileMaker. And so we need to get the new orders that have been placed in our web store into our FileMaker solution. The great thing about WooCommerce is that it provides the opportunity to configure webhooks. And those webhooks, just discovered, will send us all of the data that we need. In the case of WooCommerce, they use JSON to pass the data along. Some other webhooks will use XML. You're probably going to encounter one of those two as the payload of your webhook. Okay. Switch that over so that I can see what I'm doing. Let's begin over here with our FileMaker solution. So what I'm using today is a copy of the inventory starter solution that Claris provide, FileMaker. And I've got my inventory system set up here, and I've got, until recently, my favorite version of all time of FileMaker Server 5.5. Why is that my favorite?
That's where you started.
It was the last one that supported Linux.
Okay.
About 14 versions. And finally, we got it back again. So all I've done in the starter solution is I've added one field here for my WooCommerce ID, number 21, and I've added another tab up here so that I can see when orders have been placed in our web store. I've also added a couple of scripts, but we're going to come back to look at them later on. All the way through with our presentations, with this presentation, I'm using the FileMaker Data API as the integration method. That's the one that I've chosen. As I mentioned, we have to ensure that we have an account that is able to use that extended privilege. If we go to FileMaker Manage Security, you'll see here that I have an account, the name of which is Webhook, it has a privilege set called webhook. It has a super secret secure password, which is web. If we take a look at the extended privilege set, you can see that in this case, I've turned on all 5 of the possible integration methods. When you're setting this up for yourself, don't do that. Use only the one you're going to use. You'll also see right now that at present, this account has the ability to create and edit in all tables and all view, and all execute. Again, don't do that. This is purely for demonstration purposes. The account that you use for your integration, lock it down. Allow it only things that it has to be able to do. Probably it has to have one extended privilege. It has to have the ability to write to one field in one table and run one script. That's probably all it should be able to do. So lock it down completely. Why? Well, because you're going to be storing that username and password to someone else's system in many cases. Or you're going to be storing them in places where other people can have access to them. So just make sure that that account has only the permissions that it absolutely needs to have. Just get rid of that. I mentioned that I put everything into a table called webhook request. See here that I was testing things this morning to make sure they still worked. So let's just get those. Here is my table. It has just my payload field and then a bit of metadata down here at the bottom, just so that I know what's going on when records get added to that table. Once that record has been created, as I said, we have to be able to process it. And up here, I've got a script which is called create from WooCommerce JSON. We're not going to look at this script in much detail. All it's doing is it's taking payload that we expect to receive from WooCommerce, and it's parsing out the data that it needs to find and update the customer, to create the order, and to add the line items. What this script does isn't really relevant to the purpose of the webhook. But you're going to need to write a script like this that can parse the JSON or XML that you get and perform the necessary business logic. But that's just bread and butter to a FileMaker developer, parsing JSON to do stuff. So I'm not going to worry about that. That's not important in this session. It's getting everything up to there that is the relevant bit. On the WooCommerce side, things are reasonably straightforward. I've got my shop. Thought I'd better have something a bit more modern to sell other than just one. 7 seemed like a good step forward. So I've only got 2 products in my store. Over here in WooCommerce, we can see that if I look at my products list, I've got those 2 products. And if I hover here just below that, you can see that this is FileMaker Pro 7 has ID of 33, and this has ID of 21. So that's the ID that I've put in that inventory table in my FileMaker solution. Because when I sell one of these in my store, that's the ID that WooCommerce are going to say, you've sold ID number 21. So I had to know which product to find. So you're going to need to do some customizations to your solution to ensure that when you receive the payload, it matches something meaningful to the solution. Okay, makes sense? Everybody kind of gets where we're at with that. Okay, that's good.
You are licensed to sell those versions of FileMaker, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
With Rosemary right here, I didn't want
No, there's no issue. And look, the other great thing is I've got an infinite supply of them because they came on CD, so I just burn another one whenever
I don't need 7. I've got that one. I need 5.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I'll ship it to you tomorrow.
3. Okay.
So, in this session for the Roll Your Own, I'm going to use PHP as my example. Now, I chose PHP for one very simple reason. It's because PHP exists all over the web. It's also really easy to write a webhook receiver in one file in about 100 lines of code. Okay? As I said, you could write this in whatever language you like. I've got examples that will come out with the resources. I've got a PHP example, a Node.js example, and a Python example. So you can take a look at how you could go about rolling your own in those languages. One bit of this file is the setup at the top. You can see here that the first thing I'm doing is I'm setting up some configuration. Where's my FileMaker server? What's the database called? What layout am I dealing with? My super secret username and password. I've got a field and I've got a script. So basically that's configuring this. I've got this method called consume. Consume has to do three things. It has to log into FileMaker. It has to create a record and call a script with the payload. And it has to log out from FileMaker again. Okay? Well, exactly what that does isn't that important to us. I'm sure many of you are PHP developers and you can look at this and go, why is he just using curl? Because I wanted a really portable, simple solution, no dependencies. But basically, this file will do all of the things that we need to do. Now, I've put this on a web server. Because it's PHP, it can go on any web server that runs PHP. Sweet. Now, that could, in the case of us using WordPress, we could actually run this on our WordPress server as well, because it's just a simple PHP file. I've stuck that up on a PHP web server that I just happen to have lying around, and there we go. Let's rock on over to WooCommerce, and we want to set up WooCommerce to call our endpoint. How we do that in WooCommerce is somewhat convoluted. Settings, advanced, webhooks, and we want to add a webhook. It's grown. Let's make sure it's active. Now, topic is the event. When do we want to call this webhook? We want to call this webhook when an order is created. Where do we want to send this? We want to send it to here. TTI just happens to be a random web server that I run, and I've put my webhook PHP code on there at this address. I can configure a secret. I mentioned that with a lot of webhook integrations, you can have some way of confirming that the payload you receive came from the source system. The way WooCommerce does it is it lets you configure a secret. It then hashes the payload with the secret and passes that as a header. So I could inspect that in my code. And that's one of the potential advantages of rolling your own code. Many of the other integration methods don't provide an easy way that we can validate that secret is there. Okay, and then I'm going to save my webhook, which takes great. Love it when that happens in a live team. Why did my operation time out? Anyone got any ideas? Just not.
It blacklisted your server.
Not beyond the realms of possibility. So although it is saying it's timed out, we can see that it is actually working. And we can see that it's working because here in my webhook file, I've currently got 4 records, and I've got this payload called webhook ID number 6. If I come over here and save that again, we're going to find that I now have 5 records with webhook ID 6. Don't know what it's complaining about. We're not going to worry too much about that. We're just going to say thank you very much. Let's hop over here to my store. Let's stick a copy of FileMaker Server 5.5 in my cart for this gentleman. Right. We'll hop close my cart. It's telling me I've now got 2. Maybe we'll just have 1. Go to my checkout. My super card stored in there. If anyone would like the rest of the card number, just 42424242. That's my super secret Stripe test. I paste my order. Let's hop back over here to FileMaker and we jump along to next record. It's still saying 96. It doesn't work for me. I saw that it worked because I just deleted it. Okay, so in theory what happened just then is that we got a new record in here and we got our script created. For some reason this morning it doesn't want to work for me. That is the life of live demos and the life of webhooks. Sometimes it just doesn't work.
There's 2 more records. Just got it.
Oh,
there you go.
Did it? Oh. So yeah, it does. Sometimes these things do take time as well, especially when you're standing in front of a bunch of people.
Well, I'm using it for stuff.
Well, it could be that I'm using FileMaker 7.5 as well. So basically you can see that I'm getting that payload. And as I said, it's a great big blob of JSON. And our script has hopefully worked its magic for us and created a new order and a new order item. And if I pop over here, you should find that I've got a new order from Fred Spoon, my alter testing ego, who placed today at 3:30 a.m. Why 3:30 a.m.? Well, because I'm from New Zealand and that's what time it is there. Where my FileMaker server currently is. So that's my order. That's my webhook working. Okay. So in summary, roll your own does work. Can be done with relatively little code. I've got less than 100 lines of PHP there that's actually doing the job for me. My JSON example only needs about 20 lines of custom code, but it has several external dependencies, so it's a trade-off. I would, however, suggest don't do this unless you're already adding it to an existing web application. If you already have web integrations against your FileMaker solution, adding one more endpoint for your webhook integration is relatively straightforward. If you're doing this just to receive webhooks, I'd like to suggest that there are better ways that have less of the overhead and less of the knowledge necessary to be able to write and secure that implementation. Node-RED. Node-RED is an automation tool. It has some pros. You may already be using it. It's become quite popular in the FileMaker community for doing integrations around FileMaker solutions. It's free. Again, it's free. It's open source. You can contribute to it if you'd like. It has no usage costs because it's free. It's open source. You're hosting it yourself. It's customizable to your exact requirements. No reliance on third parties. It's your data on your servers. The cons, you have to set up a Node-RED server. You have to maintain a Node-RED server. That's the most difficult part of this. Thankfully, Jason Young, who's a really super helpful fellow in the FileMaker community, has written this blog post down here about how to get a Node-RED server set up for integration with FileMaker. Node-RED provides a web management interface. Here it is. This is a Node-RED implementation that I've got set up to help with this demo today. Basically, we're looking at a blank canvas here, and you can see on the left-hand side that I have these nodes that I can use to bring things in. Over here under the hamburger icon, I've got the option to look at settings and at palette. Node-RED provides the framework, and then you add plugins to it. One of the plugins that I've already got installed here is called Node-RED Contrib FileMaker. written by someone who now works for FileMaker, as it happens, but it's a community module that allows Node-RED to interact easily with a FileMaker solution. On the left-hand side here, you'll see that there are a whole series of different functions that we can call, or nodes as they're referred to. Now, you will recall that in order to receive a webhook, we have to expose an HTTP endpoint. So let's grab the HTTP. Oh, no, hang on. I know why it's not working. I need a flow first. Grab my HTTP in. So that's basically going to expose an HTTP endpoint. I can double click on that, I can configure it, and I can call it demo. So basically, when something is sent to nr.msdev.co.uk/demo, this flow is going to be triggered. I'm just going to call it receive hook. Now, whenever a remote system sends us data, we actually have to send something back. We have to say, got it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to offer an HTTP response. I'm going to send the status code of 200 back. Why 200? 200 means okay. There are better status codes that I could send. I could say 201 accepted or 202 created. However, I happen to know that WooCommerce gets really upset if you don't tell it 200. I'm just going to go with tell it 200. 200's okay. It's perfectly acceptable. The way Node-RED works is that you connect things together. So I can drag the connector from receive hook to HTTP 200. So this will now work. I can now use that as my endpoint, and the system will be happy because it will host my payload and it will get a response back. It's happy. It's not much use to us because it doesn't do anything. I mentioned before that I've got that contributed module for FileMaker installed here, and you can see that there are a whole raft of different nodes that we can use with FileMaker. And the thing that we want to do is we want to create a record. I drag that on there and I have to do a little bit of configuration. I have to set up a client. So do that. I'm going to call this demo. Where is my server? ms.dev.z. What is my database? It's called inventory. What was my secrets? Paper secret credentials. So what I'm doing here is I'm telling Node-RED how to connect to my FileMaker server. Okay? Node-RED assumes that I am using the data API. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. This implementation, the community contributed module that I'm using to make it really easy to do this, assumes I'm using the data API. So I've added that in. Now, if I look at the documentation for this, I can see that in order to create a record, I have to have something called inputs for the layout, the data, and any scripts that I want to call. In order to do that, I'm going to need to create that data, get it in a way that I can use. Much like working with FileMaker, Node-RED provides a million different ways that we can configure something. For me, I find using a function to be the simplest way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my receive hook and I'm going to feed the data into my function. You can see that I've now got multiple things coming off that request hook, the receive hook node. You can have as many as you like. If we wanted to monitor what was happening, I could put a debug up here and I could send the data into my debug as well so that I could see the data that I was receiving. Within this function, you can see that it says at the very end there, return message. Message MSG is this little JSON blob that gets passed along by node red every time you make a connection from one point to the other. Now, we saw from the create record that we need to say the layout, the data, and the scripts. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say message.layout equals webhook request. Okay, that is the name of the layout that I want my record created in. Okay, I'm going to say message.data, the data that I want to send. And here I create an object which references the fields on the layout I want populated. So on my webhook request layout, I have a field payload, and in there I want to put the payload from the message. Now, message.payload is a special term in Node-RED. It says the body of the content, that message that's being passed along. And I want to take that and I want to put it in the payload field. Make sense? Yep. The last thing that I want to do is I want to call my script. I want to call the script that's going to process that payload. So I'm going to say message.script, and the one that I want is I want to use create from webhook. That's the name of the script. So basically I'm saying build me this little set of data that I can pass on. So I'm going to take that function, I'm going to connect it to my create record. I'm going to go back into the configuration of that, and I've put the layout at message.layout. I just did that in that function, right? Whereas the data that I want, it's in message.data, and then in my scripts, it's in message.scripts. And as I type that, I realize that I've made a slight configuration error. You'll note that scripts is plural because it's in expecting an array. If we look over here in the documentation, the scripts to run, the scripts plural when creating a record. And there's a link there that has more information about that. I'm just going to save that. Let's pop back in here because this actually needs to be scripts. It needs to be array. Needs to be an array of objects. And we need to have name script, just as while I write my notes. Okay, done. Create record, scripts, done. Okay, cool. So basically, that looks like it should work. We've done the three things that our webhook needs to do: expose an HTTP endpoint, receive a payload, create a record, call a script. Yeah, should work. What we're going to do is we're going to hit deploy up here. So that's now successfully deployed that. Come back here and remember what I put as the endpoint demo. So let's jump over to WooCommerce. Let's change this from roll your own to be red. Let's change this to be red. This demo. Hit save webhook and see what happens. I did call that. It's giving me a 404. Why is it giving me a 404? I did call that. That. Save webhook. Still giving me 404. Not my day. Do you know how many times I've done this? Okay.
Your hook in here was a get method you post.
Thank you. Well spotted.
Yep.
Oh, good to have the man in the front row who's paying attention. Let's try this once more with feeling.
Yeah.
Created a secret too.
Hey,
Yes.
thank you very much. Okay, so that's telling us that it's been able to connect. If we jump back over here to our webhook request table, we should find that our last record is webhook ID 6. So that's great. That's how WooCommerce checks that everything's working. So back to my store. Let's quickly shop ourselves. FileMaker Pro 7. Let's check out. Back to FileMaker. Wait patiently.
For it to go across the world
Patiently.
and back again.
Keep waiting some more. And decide to. Where is record 10? There it is.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, record 10. And you can see, same data payload. Okay, completely different way of doing it, same data payload, and all going well, same response, because in our order to item table, we've got a new order. It's for a different product, so looks like we're getting the right stuff.
Awesome.
Okay, node red.
Nice.
Okay, next one. 2 down, 3 to go. The good news is they get easier from here.
Nice.
Yeah. AutoFMS Pros may already be in your tech stack. No code. Result. Here's an annual cost from around $400. It's an additional external dependency. You have to make specific customization to your database, your data, someone else's server. Some of you might know I'm telling you things that are no longer true as of about a week ago. What did Proof Guys do? They made it free
Wow.
forever. Your data, your server.
Oh,
So AutoFMS, and I'm not a sales pitch, I don't work for Proofgeist. I know there's some Proofgeist people here who are about to put up their hand and tell me you were wrong. AutoFMS became free about a
We have
week ago.
witnesses.
It is awesome. That is really kind. Thanks, Proofgeist. Let's have a look at AutoFMS. Yeah. AutoFMS is a module that you install on your FileMaker server, its current incarnation. For those of you that are familiar with Auto, this probably doesn't look like what you're used to. This is version 4. It's their brand new free one. Todd was kind enough to give me access to the beta program so that I knew what I was talking about when I got here and didn't act silly. Basically, the original purpose of Auto was to help you with your with running the data migration tool. It's for doing deployments from one server to another, and so on. But it comes with some awesome side effects, one of which is the ability to create webhooks. I'm going to skip over most of these tabs because the one that we're interested in is this one about API keys. API keys is the way in which AutoFMS manages relationships between itself and your FileMaker solution. I'm going to create a data API key. I'm going to choose a FileMaker file. I'm going to choose inventory.fmp. Oh, I'm kind of cheating a bit here because I've already set this up. Anyway, label. So this label is webhooks. What is my super secret username? Who can remember?
You mistyped webhooks.
It's fortunately just a label. And here is my super secret password. Now, AutoFMS, because it's running on my FileMaker server, it knows what FileMaker databases are available on there which have the data API extended privilege enabled. So it's able to automatically populate this list of databases for me, which is super handy. I don't have to know about it. All I have to know is a username and password. And if I hit create, you can see that it's gone off there and it's created that API key for me. So that's the configuration. That's connecting to my file. If I come down here to webhooks and I want to register a webhook, again, I select my database because it knows what databases I've got. I choose that. It knows that I've already got an API key. I've already given it my username and password. This channel is the name, the URL that I want to give it. So I'm going to call this demo order. And you can see there that it's creating a URL for me, a webhook URL. Register. There is my webhook, and you can see there that the URL is auto/receiver/inventory.fmp12 demo order. I come over here and I go view or test, and I go send webhook. You can see that it's gone off and it's done everything that I needed to do. Now, the thing about the way in which Auto FMS works is that it requires you to add a table and a couple of scripts and a couple of layouts to your solution. The really cool thing is they provide an add-on that does all of that for you. So you add the add-on to your solution, and that creates that additional table, creates a layout folder called Auto Receiver, and it creates an Auto Receiver table. You can see here that we've already got a record in there. That's the one that just got created when I added my webhook. So the way that Auto Receiver works is that it creates the record, puts the payload in the field, and it also calls its own script for us. So down here you can see that we've got the Auto Webhook Receiver, which has an Auto Receiver, and in here we have the way in which we can set what happens based on that channel. Okay? So over here, I said that my channel was demo order. That was my channel. So in my receiver file, I say when the channel equals demo order, then run this script. Okay? And that's just my script that's going to process, pass the payload out, and all of those good things are going to happen. Okay, I'm just going to grab my URL, pop over here to commerce, change this to auto, paste that in there. I'm going to say webhook. It's going to say webhook saved successfully. Wasn't that so much easier than all those other ones? And if we flick back over to FileMaker and to our inbox, you'll see here that WooCommerce has just sent my webhook ID 6 just to prove that it's working. Okay. Once more we're feeling, let's go shopping. Cart. Check it. Place my order. And we're going to different table. Wait a moment, because we know it's slow. Even now, get record 3 in here. He says hopefully. He says hopefully. He says hopefully. Okay. There's our payload. There's our cooking with gas. Woo! Okay. And now, because I'm running out of time, FM API is a custom-built service to solve this problem for us. It's no code, it's a click to configure. It's pay for usage from about $120 annually, and it's an external additional dependency, and it's your data to someone else's server. This is FM API. It has the ability to create a database connection, except I've been logged out. Demo. I can add a database connection here. Demo. It provides different ways in which I can interact with my solution. I'm going to use the data API for 18, HTTPS, dev.z, username, webhook, password, webhook, webhook. Now, because it's not running on my FileMaker server, it has to ask for that data before it can load the list of databases, but then it gets databases. I can test the connection, just like it worked. I save that. Come over here, I can add a webhook. Name, demo. I choose which connection I want to use. Select my layouts for me. Webhook request. What script do I want to run? I want to establish context by UUID. Come to that in a minute. Go to field list. I want to put it in the payload. I want to chain my field and script and my primary key. Now what this is doing is it's saying, make a record, stick the data in the payload field, and then call the script, giving it the UUID of the record that it has just created. Okay? Here's my webhook. It's good. Save that. And you can see here that it's generated a URL for me that I can pop over here in commerce. And it's got a UUID on it, just as a mechanism by which FileMaker can know where to call. Okay, if we look in our webhook request, the last record in here is just a test packet that comes from FileMaker with foo and bar and all those good things. I'm not going to go shopping. You're going to trust me on this one, aren't you? Claris Connect. Pros, it's free if you're using under 500 flow steps per month. No code, click to configure. Cons, if you're using over 500 flow steps per month, there is a cost associated with it. It's an additional external dependency, your data summons. For those of you that haven't seen Claris Connect before, I'm going to talk about it a lot more in my session I'm doing tomorrow morning. Lots of other people are going to talk about Claris Connect a lot over the course of the session, over the course of the next 2 days as well. Basically, we start off by creating a project, and in our project, we create a flow. Now, these flows are very similar to what we saw in Node-RED, but just the way in which they're configured is slightly different. We have the ability, the first thing that we have to do is we have to have a trigger. What's going to trigger our flow? And it's going to be an HTTP request. I'll continue in here. We can just choose webhook. Let's just call this order, create order. Okay, and so you can see that we have to send an HTTP request to the URL that we've been given. There we go, click on it, it opens up in a browser and magically keeps Claris Connect happy because I have confirmed that I can access that endpoint. I save my trigger. So now I've got an HTTP endpoint that I can use. There it is here. What do I want to do with my incoming request? I want to perform an action. You can see here that the actions I can perform are many and varied, but right at the top I've got the ability to connect to the Claris FileMaker server. To do that, what do I want to do? Create a record. Continue. Now I need to sign in. Domain is username, webhook, password, webhook, database, story, sign in. Everybody's happy. Continue. What layout do I want? You can see that it's gone off. Claris Connect's gone off. Talk to my solution. It said what layouts are available in here. We want the webhook request. And Claris Connect inspects that layout and it says, what fields have you got on your layout? And it's come back and it's given me a list of 3. In my payload field, I can set data that comes from the previous flow step. And if I look at this, it shows me all of the data that comes from that HTTP request. And down here, somewhere, I should have a body, except I did it as a GET request. I needed to, rather than doing this in the browser to keep it happy, I should have done it in Postman to create it as a post request, which would allow me to add my message body here. which it's not going to let me do, is it? So let's just grab that. And it's still got this one. Okay, sorry, I've run out of time to demo that. Anyone who's keen, stick around and I'll do it properly when I'm not rushing. Show you how we go about it. Let's jump back over to Keynote. Claris Connect. Those of you who are familiar with Claris Connect will know it actually has a connector for WooCommerce. So as well as building my own, I could use the WooCommerce plugin as that trigger. Rather than creating an HTTP request as the trigger, I could use the WooCommerce plugin. So which would I suggest that you use? Roll your own? Only do that if you've got a web application to leverage. That's my advice. If you want to write your own code and manage it all on your own servers, go wild. But I'd suggest there are easier ways. Node-RED, only if you need it to be free or it's already in your tech stack. I wouldn't suggest installing Node-RED just to expose web. AutoFMS is a fantastic choice if it's already in your tech stack, particularly now that it's free. Even if it's not in your tech stack, probably a really good one to consider. FMAPI is a good choice for anyone. It's easy to set up. Claris Connect is also a great choice for anyone, particularly if you're under that 500 flow steps per month, because it's also a free option that's available to you as well. All the others that I mentioned at the beginning, absolutely. If you're familiar with those technologies or they're in your tech stack already, use them. Don't go adding additional dependencies just to solve this problem. If you've already got the Monkey Bread plugin and you're really familiar with it and know how to use it, great, use that. If you're already using Zapier for other things, use that. But if you're not, there are some other options that are available to you here. What about the other way? What if we want to go from FileMaker to a remote system? Options, insert from URL, Claris Connect. Come and see me tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. down to over 1, where I'm going to be talking all about going from your FileMaker solution out to the world. And we'll look at different options that are available. Sorry that I had to rush there towards the end. Best laid plans and rehearsals. We've got -2 minutes, so I'm going to need to ask you to hold your questions, and I'm going to go to one of the, what are the rooms called? The Rosemary?
Yeah, there's a room on this
There's a
floor.
room on this floor where you can come and find me. I'll just go stand in the corridor.
Actually,
And I can answer any of your questions. And if you want me to do that Claris Connect demo properly for you, then please just grab me at any point, and I'm more than happy to run it through for you. Thank you very much.